Hey guys, Tarke here, and I want to do a quick first impressions on Cyberpunk. Since I've been playing for 15 hours, a melee-only build. I only use a gun when I have to, so like, there are some vehicle sections where you have to use a gun and some quest stuff. This will be zero spoilers, and I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, and that is all very relevant because all of my opinions on the game are based on those facts. Before we get into it, I want to say I'm playing on a i7 CPU, and I'm using a 1070 as my graphics card. I have everything on the highest settings. My performance has been pretty steady. I've got everything on Ultra except for some very minor things to do with fog, and some stuff to do with cloud rendering, which you can't see because we're currently looking at the bottom of the car. But yeah, so on a 1070 and an i7, we've got everything on Ultra except for like two things. So, what are the things that I really like? What are the things I really dislike? What about bugs? Because I'm getting a lot of questions about bugs. I'll go through this very quickly and I'll show you some things in game. So, in bugs, I've actually encountered very few bugs. I've only encountered 3, in fact. Those bugs is a tooltip. There's lots of stuff to just randomly pick up off the floor. I'll see if I can find any here. But it was a tooltip that wouldn't go away. And that was it. I had a random tooltip that just was stuck on my screen, and the only way I could get rid of it was to reload my save. Otherwise, I had one enemy in a lift that you'll encounter fairly early on during the prologue that was phasing in and out, and he was there, it's just his visual was bugging out. I've had 0 T-posing, I've had no random floating guns, or like gun heads, or any weird things. Those have really been the only bugs. Other than one thing I've had with ragdolling, because I'm a melee-only build, I do everything with either a katana or a knife. I went full anime. I sliced someone's arm off, and then we made like a weird dimensional rift thing between their body and their arm as they were dead on the floor. But that was basically it. So, let's talk about combat. And again, this is from the point of view of someone who's played primarily just melee. Guns feel good. Guns feel really good, actually. A lot better than I thought they would. Melee, I really like melee, but it's got a few things which are a bit janky. We'll just try and pick a random fight with someone to prove a point. So, you look like you could do that.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
Probably should have found a gang member. So, the way that the melee fists work is you've got a light attack, you've got a charge attack, you've got a block, you block before they attack to counter, and there's like a dodge. You can use the dodge with guns as well. The dodging is probably one of my only real complaint in terms of how combat feels in this game. So the way you dodge is you have to double tap movement in the direction you want to go. There's not just a button that you can bind to dodge. Like, you just press it and you dodge in the direction you're moving. Having to double tap, on keyboard and mouse at least, feels really rough. So I'm just going to run around so we find some gangers to beat up. Yeah. Otherwise, it feels pretty good. There's quite a hefty melee aim assist put on automatically, which can make the combat feel a bit like you have like some weird teleports because of the aim assist. You can turn that off. In some of the brawling side quests, or just like the unarmed one-to-one combat you'll do, you will sometimes notice that it feels like enemies also have a little bit of melee aim assist. The run speed you can see is pace. You have extreme pace. You can actually do some pretty slick parkour things, and it's been very good for me doing melee only because it means that when there's a massive gunfight going on, I can just run in, do a little slide, do some jumps, and then slice people up. Enemy health. Enemy health hasn't felt very spongy, and that is playing on the hardest difficulty. Now that could just be a point of my build. Melee weapons tend to do a lot of damage. See if we can get some police involved. Ooh, and you can see as I get hit by a car, we do in fact take a lot of damage. as you saw there. Now, the police are, like, tuned to be kind of yikes. And I am pretty low level still. But yeah, you can see that the damage you take if you pick a fight on the hardest difficulty goes very quickly. This brings up my next point, which is loading screens. One thing which I really appreciate about this game, and this is relevant to combat and I'll explain why, is there's only one load screen. And that one load screen is when you first enter the world. Otherwise, there's like no load screens at all. And one thing which really bugs me in a lot of RPGs like this is at some point something will go wrong and you'll go to reload a save. It could be you fail a fight. It could be a situation where you just like you screwed up something with the dialogue. It's got a pretty generous checkpoint system. So if you die in the middle of a quest, you don't have to do that much. One thing with the checkpoint system though, the checkpoint system automatically tends to save before cutscenes, not after cutscenes. And the saving, if you look at the top of the screen and top middle, that's how quick the saving are, which I really appreciate. I've been doing a lot of RPGs just recently while I've been waiting for Cyberpunk, and my like #1 complaint is when you want to be saving often, and it takes like 2 minutes to save, and reloading a save is a massive heartache. You can see how quick reloading saves are, and I think it's very relevant to combat because it's something you'll be doing a lot in the hardest difficulty. So yeah, so gun feel feels good to me. Melee feels... Katanas feel good. Knives feel slightly worse. Katanas because they've got shorter reach. Punching feels okay. Not mad for it. And the dodge feels a bit janky. Player choice. So, player choice has been surprisingly high. So again, in the 15 hours I've played, it took me 8 hours to do the prologue as a street kid. Melee only. Some of that was just because I was playing on a hard difficulty with a weak build, obviously. Will generally be kind of weaker. Early on, I do think endgame melee will be pretty good. And exploring as much side stuff as you want. The world doesn't really open up until after the prologue, and then you can just kind of go free reigns, do whatever you want. But even still, it's not too on the rails for that first initial period. Now, without spoiling anything, in those 15 hours of 8 hours being prologue and then 7 hours just doing some initial early main quests and some side quests, I've accidentally killed one romance option and I think turned another romance option into a root vegetable. Again, I won't go into how I did that, but that just kind of gives you an idea of how much there's very obvious branching choices happening on, and that's from the point of view of I only know that because I know who the romance options are for this game. One other thing I will say, which is relevant to this, is I have researched the Cyberpunk lore quite extensively because I've been really into the Cyberpunk tabletop, and I've been reading up on the timeline going back from 2020 through to the Red Period through to now 2077. And if you don't know, there is a very, very sprawling in-universe pre-2077. Would recommend reading up on the lore. You will appreciate stuff a lot more. That being said, people still managed to follow mostly what was happening. There were a couple of people in my chat when I was streaming who got very confused by stuff just happening with quests. But I think that was more so either them not paying any attention or them being thick. I think you could very much go into this game completely blind, not knowing anything, and understand everything that's been happening. But player choice is definitely good. Initially, I was planning on only doing 2 playthroughs, maybe a third. From my 15 hours I've played so far, I will definitely be doing 3 playthroughs. Another thing which vastly leans into this is the way that the builds work. As an ARPG player, obviously as a Path of Exile player, I really appreciate the level of depth you have in terms of builds. So there are 5 main stats. Every stat will have 2 to 3 trees. So you can see body's got 3 trees, 3 trees, 2 trees, 2 trees, 2 trees. You level up the core stats. The core stats will give you bonuses, and then they've got these skill trees inside them. The way these skill trees unlock is you just access the middle 3, and then as you spend more points, you then unlock. So it's like 3, 5, and then it's like you get these at like 9, and then you get this like 11, 11, 12, 11. And then you spend more points, you unlock the outer ones, and the furthest ones require 18 and 20, right? So you get that kind of idea. So athletics, this is just like life, regen, stamina. Annihilation is to do with shotguns, some burning damage stuff. Street Brawler, this is for blunt melee. There's 2 types of melee, blunt melee, bladed weapons. So this would be using stuff like baseball bats or fists. Reflex handles rifles, so sniper rifles, assault rifles, I believe also SMGs, handguns, and then bladed weapons. I'm going heavy onto bladed weapons and survival. Technical ability has a crafting tree. Crafting seems pretty undertuned, just as a heads up, currently. And engineering is to do with, like, if you want to do, like, a grenade build, and specifically tech weapons, which is a type of weapon that you can have. Intelligence has breach protocol, which means you can basically hack more things, and quick hacking is more to do with, like, in-combat hacking. And then cool has 2 trees, has a stealth tree, which is all about stealth takedown, so it can be more effective with stealth. It has a whole thing about throwing knives and poison, which is really cool. And then Cold Blood is a tree that's kind of all around on death effects. If you've played Borderlands 3, this is kind of all about that. Basically, the first thing is you get this thing called Cold Blood. You gain stacks when you kill enemies. And then everything else in the tree is giving you access to more stacks, stacks when you crit, and then cool effects for each stack. So you can already see... Oh, there's quite a few different builds I could go into. Keeping in mind the average length of the game, how long you'll be playing for. So for me, having played for 15 hours, you can see I've got a reflex of 14, a body of 9. I've actually got an available attribute and perk point available now, so I'll spend that after this. I'll mostly be focusing on 2 stats. I think realistically for one playthrough, you could kind of go all in on like 2 trees realistically if you're like focusing specifically. So kind of like 2 main trees, then maybe half of a little bit. If you want to do more like hybrid-y builds, you might be spreading yourself a bit thin. Playing on the hardest difficulty, I've definitely felt like I've needed to invest into the health regen and the health stuff I have, and then the damage stuff I have from the bladed tree. So this will be a big thing when it comes to player choice and going through multiple playthroughs. I know for myself, I'll be doing this initial like just upfront brawling bladed build. I'll then be doing a pure stealth like hacking tree, like a non-lethal playthrough, and then I'll probably do like a handgun playthrough. And then if after that point I'm feeling more, I might then branch into some of the like tech weapon stuff, or like shotguns, or like maybe trying to do some cool hybrid stuff. So player choice is definitely very good. Things that I like, and then I'll go into things that I dislike, and then I'll just be like, should you buy this game? The world. The world building is great. This is the most alive city I've ever been in. It's got dynamic crowds, and it's got dynamic cars. In terms of seeing duplicate characters, you can see that that guy and that guy is the same dude. I think that's actually the first duplicate I've noticed. Otherwise, the crowds have been pretty good. There's not too much repeating people, at least that I've noticed in my initial 15 hours. Every single district, every single different part of the map will have different kinds of people, different kinds of vehicles, different kinds of locale. And based on the time of day and the area you're in, the traffic changes and the streets change. But this definitely hasn't felt like a dead city. Now, things I will say about that, and you probably might have noticed a little bit from the very brief bit of driving I've done, I definitely notice popping, especially when you're just like driving, blasting down on a straight. That kind of sucks that it hasn't been ruining the immersion for me. If you're someone who's really sensitive to that stuff, maybe you might want to wait a little bit before you get into Night City yourself. One thing that I really appreciate when it comes to the world building of this game is I live in London, so I'm used to cities that don't make sense. I'm used to cities that just have random dead-end streets that go to nowhere, verticality, stuff like that. That's something that I really appreciate. A lot of video game cities are too clean. All the streets are too straight, and it all kind of makes sense. No, you can't go into every single building, but even in just the 15 hours I've played through, I've gone into lots of exterior settings. I've been into random fights on top of buildings, in between dark alleyways. It's very easy to just get lost in this place, and if you're someone who's into architecture, or you're just into like vibing in brand new cities, I think you'll have a lot of fun exploring Night City. Loading screens I've already mentioned, amazing. Music was one of the things I was most hyped for this game. I can't play that much music because, you know, YouTube is weird. That being said, I am playing with streamer mode, and I can confirm for Run the Jewels fans, Run the Jewels tracks are still enabled on streamer mode, which is something I was really hyped for because there's lots of bands I'm big fans on who've worked on the soundtrack for this game. I've been someone who's really enjoyed the radio music, and I've also been really enjoying just the atmospheric score and like combat music. Those have all been excellent. Dialogue. Dialogue's been really good. So I'm playing a female V. I'm a big fan of the female V voice actor. My next playthrough I'll be playing with the male V, see how it compares. A few of my viewers have said that bouncing between my stream and Noogie's stream, and Noogie's playing a male V, if my viewers know what's going on. And they were telling me there's actually been a fair amount of difference between the two. So I think it's pretty safe that you'd be going through like maybe at least 2 playthroughs with 2 very different builds, different life paths, which changes your prologue, and then going for like a male and a female V option. The dialogue of all the NPCs I've encountered so far has been really good. Really enjoying it. And I've been very impressed with all the NPCs, both the main quests and side quests, and the side quest NPCs have been the most fun I've encountered so far, although there are already a few people in the main quest that I've become quite attached to. Map and zone I've already talked about. Quests and side quests, as I just said, really recommend the quest and side quest stuff. Brain Dance. So Brain Dance is a very cool system, but massive warning if you are susceptible to seizures. There is a huge strobe-like effect. It's gotten a lot of attention recently because one of the journalists was having seizures caused by this. CD Projekt Red has added seizure warnings to the game, but that's the main thing. If you do have any sort of weakness to just like strobing lights, it's very telegraphed. If you know it's when the Brain Dance sequence happens, you put a headset on, and then you just get this like intense strobe. So if you know it's coming, you could always just like look away for the first 5 seconds of every Brain Dance, but I just want to let you know that that's there. But I do enjoy Brain Dance a lot otherwise. The lack of cutscenes is great, and that will sound weird. So nearly every conversation you have happens in universe. You can walk away from them. You can look around completely freely. This is very good for immersion, and it also means that if you get a random like pop-up, like when you drive around, people will be calling you up on your phone. You can bring up your phone, you can like ring people and read up messages and all that sort of stuff. When you enter new areas, when you unlock new missions, people call you up, and I've had it when I've been on a main quest and I get a hi V, would you like to do a side mission? And I'm like, bro, not now. But the fact that because the way all the dialogue works, I can literally be talking to someone like, yo, 1 second, mate, just walk into the corner, have my little side thing, then dip back in like, all right, sorry, we're cool. And it adds a lot of really natural pauses. Like, you'll be talking to an NPC, you'll go to leave the room, then as you're leaving the room, they'll then be like, hey, can I add one more thing? And it really makes it feel really organic and really well. Things I dislike. The minimap. The minimap, and one of the big complaints you'll see if you've been watching a lot of first impressions or playing the game yourself, is the driving. The driving, it feels like, at least from the vehicles I've had access to this far, and every vehicle handles very differently. I will say the bikes I've used, the bikes feel great, and I'll be trying to get a bike as soon as possible. The only bikes I've encountered is ones I've stolen off biker gangs, but I have been offered a bike that I can buy, so I'll be saving up to buy that. But yeah, it feels like all the weight is in your front too, and it's very easy to spin out. So we'll try and take a sharp turn. So we'll take this upcoming turn on the left.
Watch it, jackass.
That was me using the handbrake. So yeah, it's very easy to spin out. So you kind of get used to it. Again, I'm playing on keyboard and mouse. I've heard that it performs a bit better on controller. Is you've got to like completely take your finger off the accelerator and handbrake into most turns. Now, the minimap is the main culprit, I feel like, in making the driving feel rough. You'll notice that it's very zoomed in. So if you're trying to follow the GPS system, you get very little warning on when you need to take a turn. So when it's very easy to spin out on turns, at least with these starting vehicles you have access to, the fact that you get such little warning on the turns, and the turns are so sharp, it kind of like doubles down on this problem. I think if we had a more zoomed out minimap, you can see it like here, for example, like if you just look at the minimap, you get so little warning on that sort of stuff. The driving would feel much, much better. That being said, it's not the worst driving. It's something that I've started to get used to. But the first time I got into a car, I was like, oh my god, I am not going to do any driving in this game. Fortunately, though, if you really, really don't like the driving, as I showed earlier, you can see it's definitely a bit... It seems like a random gunfight's propped out. You can go full speed demon. Well, they're the police. Let's not fuck them up. We are a helpful citizen. But that gives you an example of how good melee is. So, driving is probably my main complaint. Otherwise, and this isn't spoilers, but I'm going to show you the main big thing people then complain about is a lack of transmog. So you'll find lots of really cool clothing options as you just play. Also, shaved head V, best V. But you'll often end up just having to equip stuff because it's like, oh, this has got good stats. So you can end up looking like a bit of an idiot quite quickly. Now, that being said, even with just equipping random stuff, my character doesn't look too ridiculous. But it feels very kind of looter-shooter at times, where you're just kind of like getting thrown loot constantly. If you like that, constantly being thrown stuff, constantly checking your inventory, you'll really like it. Otherwise, I'm very shocked that there wasn't a transmog option, especially since it was something I'm pretty sure they spoke about. Hopefully it'll be added soon as a DLC. Witcher 3 had loads of free DLC options, and if not, it will be like one of the first mods that people add into the game, for sure. But yeah, it does suck that when a game which has the tagline style over substance, we have so many really cool clothing options, to not have transmog for our clothing options. But yeah, that's basically the only things I dislike. The mini-map, which makes the driving, which is feel worse. The lack of transmog. And as I said at the very start, the fact that dodge is bound to double tap on movement. It just feels a bit awkward. One thing I will say is this is a very loot-heavy game. You'll encounter... This is really good we found that random gunfight there. You'll spend a lot more time... Oh, well, now encumbered. You spend a lot more time than you would have expected just running around picking up loot. There is a pretty in-depth crafting system. However, as I said earlier, the crafting system is currently kind of poorly tuned. If you want more in-depth on that, I'd recommend watching SkillUp's review. SkillUp did a really good 53-minute long review, and his initial build was all around crafting, and he was like, yeah, the crafting economy is balked. You can dismantle at any point from your inventory. So you just go inside your backpack. You can see this is just all the random stuff that we picked up, and you just press the button to dismember and it's gone. It does feel a bit weird that there's not like better feedback on dismembering items. Like, it feels like there should be some sound effects and stuff. The fact that it just kind of happens is a bit Likewise, awkward with crafting. It feels like there's definitely some stuff there. So with that in mind, the things that I really like, the things I really dislike, well, again, the things I really like a lot and the few things which just annoy me a little bit. Do I recommend this game? I would say this game definitely could have done with a little bit more dev time. I think the delays were very justified. I haven't had anything that's ruined my experience. Some people have had more bugs than I have had. But just the little things like the pop-in, the very few bugs I have experienced, the lack of transmog, the mini-map, the driving. It does feel like a couple more, like a February kind of release or like a March release even, probably would have done this game a bit better. If, like me, though, you are someone who's been really anticipating this game for a very long time and you're super keen to just dive into it, I would highly recommend this game, and I think you'll still have fun playing it at launch. If you've got some patience, if you are like, I could wait, I would definitely say, in that case, if you can wait, if you're like, I'm safe to avoid spoilers or that sort of thing, give it a couple of months, maybe wait until the eventual, like, story DLCs start coming out. You get like the ultimate edition modes, or maybe like just even wait a couple of months to get it on sale even. But again, this is something I can 100% recommend paying at full price. But with all of these things, with any game that comes out these days, if you can wait a little bit, you then have the benefit of more bugs being ironed out, more mod support, all of that kind of thing. But yes, I'm Tarke, I'm loving Night City, I'm really enjoying the melee, and I'm going to go back to playing Ghost of Tsushima 2077. Have a good day. Bye-bye.